The air in the Geneva meeting room was perfectly controlled, a silent fact that Assessor Clarn found deeply satisfying. From his world, efficiency was the highest form of respect. He shifted 2 of his 6 limbs, the smooth carapace making a soft click against the chair designed for his kind. Before him, on a screen built into the table, the blue and white sphere of Earth turned slowly. His aide, a younger being of the same species, tapped a tentacle on a data slate. Initial tactical review of their organized military structures is complete, Assessor. Their technology is primitive, but their group coordination is intense. Clarn gave a slow blink of his primary ocular sensors. Intensity is not a measurable category. Provide analysis. Apologies. Their unit cohesion under simulated stress exceeds Concord baseline by 18%. However, their total professional soldier count is negligible on a galactic scale. Barely 30 million. Then this next step is a formality, Clarn stated, the translator turning his thoughts into flat, precise English. We observe the civilian population to confirm the non-combatant majority. Standard procedure. The door to the room hissed open. The human liaison entered. General Park Ji-ho was a man of average height for his species, with short black hair shot through with gray. He moved with a quiet, economical grace. He wore a simple dark suit, not a military uniform. Clarn had studied human expressions, but Ji-ho's face was a calm pool, showing only polite attention. Assessor Clarn, Ji-ho said, giving a small, formal nod. I hope the orbital view is acceptable. It is sufficient, Clarn replied. Please sit. We must proceed with the civilian audit phase of your species evaluation for Concord Associate status. Ji-ho took his seat, his movements unhurried. A human attendant brought in a tray with a small pot and 2 cups. Ji-ho poured a pale, steaming liquid into 1 cup. The scent was floral and grassy. Tea? He offered. We do not ingest in professional settings, Clarn said. A slight tension, a tiny break in protocol. He entered the query into his data slate. It was time for the pivotal question, the one asked of every species seeking integration into the broader galactic community's defensive frameworks. General Park, the Concord requires a clear categorization for species integration. Our strategies depend on knowing which members of a population can be mobilized for defensive actions. We have reviewed your standing armies. Now, you must help us classify your general population. Clarn leaned forward slightly, his sensors focusing on the human. Please categorize your population. Which humans are combat-ready for potential integration into Concord defensive auxiliaries? Ji-ho took a slow sip from his cup. He placed it back on the saucer without a sound. For a long moment, he looked not at Clarn, but out the window at the Swiss sky. When his eyes returned to the assessor, they held the same calm, but there was a new weight behind them. Define ready? Ji-ho said. His voice still quiet, Clarn felt a pulse of irritation. Semantics. Ready. Prepared. Trained and equipped for organized warfare. Capable of being deployed alongside Concord forces against a common threat. Ji-ho nodded slowly, as if considering this. If that is your definition, he said, then roughly 30 million. As your data shows. Precisely, Clarn said, a note of finality in his tone. The audit would now simply confirm that the other billions were harmless, focused on their simple crafts and sustenance activities. But, Ji-ho continued, the single word stopping Clarn's thought. The human leaned forward, just a little mirroring the assessor's posture. If by ready you mean the inherent latent capacity to lethally defend themselves, their immediate kin, or their defined tribe given a direct, immediate necessity and the simplest of opportunities. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Then your classification system fails.
Calarnès head shifted, tentacle twitching.
Explain, Clarn demanded. Ji-ho's gaze was unwavering. If you are asking who can kill, assessor, not who is paid to do so, then the number is different. He picked up his teacup again, a mundane action that felt suddenly charged. All of them could kill. The statement hung in the perfectly conditioned air. Clarn processed it. It was illogical. A boast. A primitive tribe's attempt to seem fearsome by inflating its numbers. The biology didn't support it. The teacher, the builder, the grower of plants. Their physiologies were soft, their instincts geared toward social cooperation, not individual combat. You are speaking in hyperbole, General, Clarn stated, dismissing it. It is a common tribal tendency. We require factual data. We will proceed with a random sampling of your civilian population. A standard observational assessment. 3 subjects, from different regions and life stages. To his surprise, Jiho did not argue. He did not try to convince. A faint, almost invisible smile touched the corners of his mouth. It was not a smile of joy, Clarn decided. It was the smile of someone who knows a secret the test cannot measure. Of course, Jiho said, his tone agreeable. A random sampling is an excellent idea. I will have our officials provide you with unconditional access to 3 citizens. You may observe them in their daily lives. No interference. Your own conclusions will be the data. His easy agreement was more unsettling than defiance would have been. Clarn felt the first, faint ripple of uncertainty. The human was not boasting. He was permitting, as if the outcome was already known to him. Very well, Clarn said, recovering his officious tone. Transmit the profiles. We will begin observation immediately. As Jiho stood to leave, he gave another small nod. Observe carefully, Assessor. Not just their actions. Observe their environment. Listen to their stories. The answer to your question is not in their job titles. After the human left, Clarn reviewed the 3 profiles that appeared on his screen. A female teacher, 28 cycles old. A male fabricator, 45 cycles old. A female elder, 60 cycles old. Previously a vehicle operator. All from the peninsula nation of Korea. Their bios indicated no military service, no advanced combat training. They were perfect examples of non-combatants. See, he said to his aide, the ripple of worry fading. Hyperbole. We will observe these 3, confirm their passivity, and note the human's exaggerations in our report. Their soldiers may be intense, but their civilization is clearly divided like all the others. Warriors and civilians. It is universal. The aide tapped the image of the teacher, Kim Mina, who was smiling in a garden with a small furry creature in her arms. They seem very peaceful. They are, Clarn said, turning off the screen. The blue planet continued to turn, silent and distant below them. We will prove it. Deploy the observers. Let the audit begin. The 3 observers were small things no larger than a human hand. Their shells were made of a material that changed color and texture to match their surroundings. To a human eye, they looked like a large drone fly, a dusty sparrow, and a slightly fat beetle. They moved with perfect, silent efficiency. One flew to the coastal city of Busan and found Kim Mina leaving her high school. The observer, now looking like a local insect, settled on the strap of her bag. It scanned her constantly. Heart rate, steady, calm. Stress hormones, low. Brainwave patterns, indicative of a mind reviewing the day's lessons, thinking of dinner. She stopped at a market, buying vegetables and a small piece of fish. She spoke softly to the vendor, her voice gentle. She walked to a small apartment building. Inside, a small, fluffy white cat greeted her with a quiet meow. Mina's face, which had been politely neutral, blossomed into a warm smile. Hello, Bada, she whispered, scratching the cat behind its ears. The observer tracked the change in her biochemistry. Oxytocin levels increased. Endorphin levels increased. This was a being of care and affection. She prepared a simple meal, humming softly. She graded student papers on the table, her notes in the margins kind and encouraging. Later, she watered a collection of potted plants on her balcony, pointing out new leaves to her cat. The observer on the ship, receiving the data stream, compiled its report. Asterisk subject A. Kim Mina. Female, 28 years. Primary activity. Nurturer/educator. No signs of aggression. Dominant behaviors. Caretaking. Instruction. Threat assessment. Negligible. Asterisk, the second observer found Li Jun in the city of Taejun. He was in a park with his two children, a boy and a girl. They were kicking a ball. Jun ran with them, his movements a little clumsy but full of laughter. He let the boy score a goal and swooped him up into the air, the child giggling wildly. The observer, a sparrow on a nearby bench, scanned him. Elevated heart rate from exercise, cortisol levels low, serotonin elevated. This was a social, playful being. The family went home, a small house with a neat garden. Jun's wife, Hannah, greeted them. There was easy conversation about the day. After dinner, Jun went to his garage. This was his space. It was clean and organized. Tools hung on a pegboard in neat outlines. Wood was stacked in one corner. The observer settled near a window and watched. Jun put on some soft music and began to work on a piece of furniture. It was a small bookshelf for his daughter. He measured a length of wood, his brow furrowed in concentration. He used a saw, his movements precise and practiced. He sanded the edges until they were smooth. There was a deep focus here, a quiet contentment in creating. He was a builder, a maker. He took raw things and turned them into useful, stable forms. The observer scanned the tools. They were simple: a saw for cutting, a hammer for joining, a tape measure for calculating. All were designed for construction, not destruction. After 2 hours, he cleaned his tools, putting each one back in its exact place. He looked at the half-built shelf with a satisfied nod. He turned off the light and went inside to read his children a bedtime story. His voice was a low, soothing rumble. The data stream to the ship was clear. Asterisk subject B. Li Jun male, 45 years. Primary activity: caregiver/artisan. No signs of aggression. Dominant behaviors: play, construction, organization. Threat assessment: negligible. Asterisk, the third observer, the beetle, found Choi Soo-ji in the quieter city of Jeonju. She was in a public park just as the morning sun was warming the air. She wore comfortable, loose clothing. She moved through a series of slow, graceful motions, her arms flowing through the air like water, her weight shifting from one foot to the other with a dancer's balance. The observer identified the activity as taegyuk, a low-impact exercise for elders. Her heart rate was steady and slow. Her breathing was deep and measured. She was the picture of peace. After her exercises, she walked slowly to a community garden plot. Here her pace changed. She knelt in the dirt with a soft grunt, her hands, covered in well-worn gloves, moving with purpose. She pulled weeds, her movements efficient. She checked the leaves of her tomato plants, her eyes sharp. She spoke to an older man tending the next plot, her voice rough but friendly. They laughed about the weather. She spent the afternoon at her own small home. Her backyard was not just a garden. It was a dense, green world. Vegetables grew in neat rows. Fruit trees stood in corners. She pruned a persimmon tree with thick shears, her cuts clean and sure. She knew exactly where to cut to guide the tree's growth. She watered her plants, talking to them as if they were old friends. "You're thirsty today, aren't you?" she murmured to a row of peppers. Her biometrics showed only a state of focused calm. Later, her granddaughter visited. The little girl, maybe 5 years old, ran into the garden. Suji's face, lined with wrinkles, transformed. It was like the sun coming out. She sat on a small bench and held the girl on her lap, pointing out different flowers. The observer, clinging to a leaf, recorded it all. This was an elder, a keeper of growing things, a source of gentle love and knowledge for the next generation. The report to the ship was definitive. Asterisk subject C. Choi Soo-ji. Female, 60 years. Primary activity: cultivator/elder. No signs of aggression. Dominant behaviors: nurturing growth, gentle exercise, intergenerational care. Threat assessment: 0. Asterisk Assessor Clarn reviewed the 3 reports on the main screen of his ship. The data was unambiguous. The visuals were clear. Here was the teacher, the father, the grandmother. They represented the harmless, productive backbone of any civilization. The part that needed protection. He turned to his aide. feeling a return of his earlier certainty. You see, the general statement was emotional, not factual. These are non-combatants. Their value is in their trades and their community. They are soft. They create, they tend, they teach. They do not destroy. The audit is progressing as expected. The aide agreed, its tentacles moving in a pleased pattern. Shall we continue to the next phase? A longer observation period to confirm consistency. Yes, Clarn said. Continue deep observation. But the conclusion is already clear. Humanity has its warriors, and it has its civilians. The categories hold. We are simply proving it. Below them, Earth turned. In Busan, Mina fed her cat. In Taejun, Jun planned his next cut of wood. In Jeonju, Suji sang a quiet song to her granddaughter. It was a peaceful scene. The observers, invisible and silent, watched and recorded. They watched the soft hands, the gentle voices, the calm routines. They were programmed to look for weapons, for aggression, for tactical thinking. They saw none of it. They did not yet understand what they were truly looking at. They saw the surface of the water, calm and still. They had no concept of the deadly currents that could flow beneath it, or of how quickly a still surface could shatter. The observation of Lee Jun continued without event for several days. The routine was deeply normal. He went to his architecture office. He came home. He played with his children. He worked in his garage. To the observer watching from a high shelf, camouflaged as a bundle of wires, he was a model of predictable, peaceful life. It was a Thursday evening. The sun had set. Jun's wife, Hannah, had taken the two children to a music lesson across town. Jun was alone in the house, finishing the sanding on the small bookshelf. The garage was warm under the glow of a single hanging light. Soft music played from a speaker. The observer noted the change first. Jun's head lifted from his work. His body went very still. The sanding block stopped moving. The music still played, but he was no longer listening. A sound. Not from the garage door, but from the side of the house. A scrape, a thump, the subtle crunch of gravel under a shoe that did not belong. Jun did not call out. He did not move toward the house door. He simply stood up. As he did, the observer's sensors detected a sudden, massive shift in his physiology. His heart rate spiked, but not in a chaotic, frightened way. It accelerated into a powerful, steady rhythm. His breathing deepened and slowed. The cortisol in his system, a stress hormone, was joined by a sharp surge of adrenaline and norepinephrine. His pupils dilated, but his face, caught in the dim light, showed no panic. It was empty of expression, a mask of pure focus. The man who had been gently sanding wood was gone. In his place was something else. He moved, not with speed, but with a terrible, silent efficiency. He turned off the music with a tap. The sudden quiet was heavy. His eyes scanned the garage. They were no longer the eyes of a father looking for his measuring tape. They were the eyes of a man assessing a room for its potential. The observer, following protocol, scanned the room for weapons. He found none. Only tools. Jun did not see tools. He saw options. His hand closed around a heavy titanium measuring ruler, 24 inches long. It was not a knife, but it had a sharp, squared-off end. He flipped it in his grip so he held it like a short club. In the same motion, he picked up a can of aerosol lacquer spray from a shelf with his other hand. He did not wait. He moved to the interior door that led into the house. He did not open it. Instead, he moved to the large main garage door. He stood to the side of it, his back against the wall, in the blind spot of anyone looking in. He was perfectly still from the house. There was the sound of a window being forced, a quiet snap of a latch breaking. Then footsteps, 2 sets, moving quickly through the kitchen. Jun's breathing remained deep and steady. He waited. A shadow blocked the light under the interior door. A handle rattled. Locked, a low voice said from inside the house. Check in here. Another voice answered. The door from the house into the garage burst open. A large man stepped through, looking back into the house, not into the garage's shadows. Jun moved. It was not a wild attack. It was a single, precise motion. He stepped forward and drove the sharp end of the ruler into the back of the man's knee. There was a sickening pop and a scream as the leg buckled. The man crumpled. Before the second man in the doorway could react, June raised the aerosol can. He pressed the nozzle. A jet of clear, flammable lacquer sprayed into the second man's face. The man yelled, clawing at his burning eyes. June dropped the can. His free hand shot out to the workbench and came back with a length of high-tension steel wire, used for hanging pictures. As the second man staggered, blinded, June looped the wire around his ankle and yanked. The man fell hard. The first man was writhing on the floor, clutching his ruined knee. June stepped over him, toward the one with the wire around his ankle. The man was scrambling back, trying to get up. June placed a foot on his chest, pinning him. He pulled the wire tight, not around the neck, but in a way that immobilized the flailing arms. He said nothing. His face was still that empty mask, but his eyes were like chips of ice, calculating, checking the door to the house for more threats. The entire event, from the first sound to the two intruders being neutralized, took less than 15 seconds. Only then did a different sound break through. A small, frightened voice from the top of the stairs inside the house. Appa! It was his son. The music lesson must have ended early. The change in June was instantaneous. The ice in his eyes shattered. The terrifying focus vanished, replaced by raw fear. Not for himself, but for his child. He dropped the wire. "Stay there, Min-Soo. Don't come down," he shouted, his voice rough but controlled. He stepped quickly over the groaning men, grabbing a heavy wrench from the floor just in case, and moved to the bottom of the stairs, putting himself between the threat and his son. He did not look back at the men on the garage floor. Soon, the police arrived. June stood in the driveway, his arm around his trembling son who had come down. He gave his statement in short, clear sentences. He was calm again, but it was a shaken calm. He was Lee June, the father, the architect, relieved and scared for his family. The police took the two intruders away. One officer looked at the tools on the garage floor, the ruler, the spray can, the wire. He looked at June with a long, knowing glance. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Not a nod of congratulation. A nod of understanding. In orbit, Assessor Klarn and his aide reviewed the data. The video playback was clear. The biometric logs were stark. "He did not have a weapon," the aide said, its tentacles moving in confusion. "He made 3, Klarn replied, his voice quiet. He replayed the moment of the attack. The strike to the knee joint, the chemical spray to the sensory organs, the use of a binding wire to restrict movement. He did not strike to inflict pain. He struck to disable. The knee attack removes mobility. The spray removes sight and causes panic. The wire restricts action." "It was efficient," the aide conceded. "It was more than efficient," Klarn said, a cold feeling growing in his gut. He pointed to the biometric overlay on the screen. "Look, his neurological state. This is not the frenzied brain activity of fear or rage. See the pattern? This is the hypercalculating state of a tactical processor." He assessed the environment, identified resources, formulated a sequence of actions, and executed. Klarn paused, the truth dawning. This was not instinct. This was applied knowledge. They watched the final moments, the call of the child, the instantaneous shift in June's posture and expression, the protective stance. The trigger was not personal threat, Klarn whispered. It was threat to his tribe, his family. The capacity was always there, latent. It required a specific key to unlock it. The screen showed the quiet street as the police cars drove away. June was leading his son back inside, his hand on the boy's head. The peaceful father was back. But Klarn could no longer see just the father. He saw the other man, the one with the empty eyes and the measuring ruler, standing in the shadows of the garage. That man had not left. He had just stepped back, waiting. The report for Subject B remained unfinished. The word negligible blinked, waiting to be confirmed. Klarn's tentacle hovered over the key to finalize it. He did not press it. "Continue observation," he said, his voice no longer sure. All subjects. Increase scan depth. Look for underlying patterns. The observer in Choi Suji's garden had a quiet job. It watched the old woman move through her days like the slow turn of the seasons. Her life was a pattern of small, gentle tasks. The observer, looking like a fat beetle on a sunflower stalk, saw no threat. It saw only calm. Today, Suji's granddaughter, a little girl named Jiu, was visiting. They sat together on a worn wooden bench under the persimmon tree. The afternoon sun was warm. The air smelled of damp earth and green leaves. The girl had a small scraped knee from playing. Suji cleaned it with a wet cloth, her touch feather-light. "Halmiani?" the girl asked, her voice small. "Does it hurt the tree when you cut it?" She pointed to a fresh pruning cut on a low branch. Suji smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening. "A little," she said, her voice a soft, gravelly sound. "But you must cut in the right place or the whole branch grows wrong. It's like fixing a hurt." She finished with the knee and gave it a pat. "There. All better." The girl wiggled closer. "Tell me a story. A story from when you were little in the country." Suji settled back, her arm around the child. The observer adjusted its audio receptors. This was social bonding behavior, non-threatening. "When I was a girl younger than you," Suji began, her gaze drifting to the garden wall as if she could see through it to the distant hills of her childhood. "My father grew persimmons too, but his trees were on a hill near the woods. One autumn, when the fruit was fat and orange, a wild boar came." The girl's eyes grew wide. "It was a big one," Suji said, her voice taking on a rhythmic, storytelling quality. "It had been in a fight with another boar, or maybe a farmer's dog. It had a nasty cut on its side. Hurt and angry, it was tearing up the ground near our trees, looking for roots to eat." She paused, remembering. The observer recorded her steady heartbeat, her calm breath. This was a cultural narrative, likely containing a moral lesson about respecting nature. "My appa saw it from the house. He went out, but he didn't have a gun. Guns were for the army, not for farmers." Suji's hand moved in the air, sketching the memory. "He just had the tool he was using to prune the high branches. A long pole with a curved blade on the end. A pruning hook." The observer noted the tool description. An agricultural implement. "The boar saw him. It snorted. It lowered its head and charged. It was fast, all muscle and tusks." Suji's voice did not rise in drama. It remained factual, almost quiet. "My appa, he didn't run. You can't outrun a boar. He stood his ground. He held the hook not like a tool, but like a spear." The observer's logic processors flagged a subtle shift. The subject's tone was changing. The lesson was becoming instructional. "He always told me," Suji said, and now her voice was different. It was the voice of a teacher passing on vital, hard-won knowledge. It was the same tone she used when explaining how deep to plant tomato seeds. "You don't aim for the head. A boar's skull is like a rock. You'll just make it matter. You don't aim for the body. The hide is too thick, and the bones will turn the blade." She looked down at her granddaughter, not with a smile, but with a serious, direct look. The little girl was listening, utterly absorbed. "You guide the point," Suji said slowly, making a careful, pushing motion with her hand. "Here into the side of the neck. Or, if you are fast and it turns, you cut the tendon behind the front leg. Then you must get out of the way. It's not about being strong. It is about knowing the one place that works." She fell silent. The garden was quiet. The lesson was over. The observer analyzed the story. It was a recollection of a parent defending a food source from a dangerous animal. The subject identified specific anatomical weak points on a large, aggressive fauna. The stated goal was not to scare the animal, but to disable or kill it. The observer logged it as cultural memory, survival strategy. Just then, a commotion erupted from next door. A large, aggressive dog, a mix of breeds, muscular and loud, had gotten loose. It burst through a gap in the shared fence, barking wildly. It spotted Suji and the little girl on the bench. The dog's owner shouted from the other yard, but he was too far away. The dog focused, its body stiff, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Took a step toward the bench. The little girl gasped and pressed into her grandmother's side. Suji did not scream. She did not pull the girl and run, which might have triggered a chase instinct. Her reaction was immediate and deliberate. In one smooth motion. She stood up, placing her body squarely between the dog and her granddaughter. As she rose, her hand closed around the heavy garden shears that were always lying on the soil near the bench. She did not wave them in the air. She held them down at her side, the sharp steel points facing forward, almost hidden. Then she changed. She seemed to grow larger. She puffed out her chest and let out a sound. Not a yell, but a deep guttural shout that came from her belly. Ha! It was a short, explosive noise of pure authority. At the same time, she stared directly into the dog's eyes. Her gentle, wrinkled face was gone, replaced by a mask of fierce, unblinking command. Her posture was not one of fear, but of dominance. She took a single, firm step forward, not toward the dog, but to the side, angling herself better. The dog skidded to a halt. The direct stare, the sudden display of confidence, the low weapon held ready. It confused the animal's aggression. It barked once more, but the sound was unsure. Its tail, which had been stiff, dropped slightly. Suji took another slow, solid step. She did not look away. Go, she said, her voice low and hard as stone. The dog backed up one step, then two. Then it turned and trotted back through the fence gap. Its bravado gone. Suji watched it go until it was out of sight. Only then did her posture relax. The fierce light left her eyes. She let out a slow breath and turned back to her granddaughter. She knelt, her knees cracking, and pulled the girl into a hug. It's all right, little one. He was just lost and scared. The little girl clung to her, crying softly. Suji rubbed her back, whispering comfort. The gentle grandmother had returned. In orbit. Clarn watched the replay. He saw the story, then the event. His mind connected them. The story was not a fable, he said to his aide, his voice hollow. It was a combat lesson, a transmission of data from one generation to the next. Here is the threat. Here are its weaknesses. This is how you stop it. He replayed the moment with the dog. She did not panic. She applied the lesson. She assessed the threat, a smaller, faster animal than a boar. She used a different tool, but the principle was the same. Establish dominance. Protect the vulnerable. Target the will to fight, not the body. She has done this before, or she was taught by someone who had. The aide processed the data. She identified lethal and sublethal target zones. Her response was calculated. It was applied. Interspecies conflict resolution. Clarn looked at the final image on the screen. The old woman holding the child, surrounded by her peaceful, growing things. The shears lay in the dirt beside her, just a tool again. She is a cultivator, Clarn whispered. But what she cultivates is not just plants. It is knowledge. And that knowledge is of survival, of violence when needed. He felt a profound disorientation. The categories in his mind, civilian, combatant, were blurring, leaking into each other like watercolors. The report for Subject C still read threat assessment. 0.it was no longer true. Kim Mina's world was one of quiet order. Her biology classroom was a place of clean lines and clear logic. The observer, clinging to the edge of a framed diagram of a plant cell, watched her prepare for the last period of the day. She moved between the lab tables, setting out small beakers and burners. Her movements were graceful and sure. The students, 15-year-olds, filed in with their usual mix of chatter and boredom. Mina smiled at them, a warm, encouraging smile. Today, she announced, her voice clear and calm, we are looking at energy release, combustion to be specific, the transformation of chemical potential energy into heat and light. She gave a simple, safe demonstration. She used a striker to light a Bunsen burner. A small, controlled flame hissed to life. She explained the reaction. Fuel plus oxygen, plus an activation energy spark, equals fire. She spoke about the beauty of controlled reactions, the ones that powered civilization. The students took notes. The observer logged the activity. Knowledge transfer. Non-threatening. The bell rang. The students packed their bags and left. A wave of noise that faded down the hall. Mina began to clean up. She turned off the gas to the main lines. She wiped down the tables. She returned and used materials to their cabinets. One cabinet, a sturdy metal one, she locked with a small key. The observer's sensors identified the contents. Various chemical reagents, including a sealed canister of high-grade ethyl alcohol, used for sterilizing tools and creating very clean flames. The school grew quiet. The only sound was the hum of the lights and the distant sound of a janitor's cart in another hallway. Mina was alone, putting away the last of the glassware. That's when the door to her classroom swung open. It was not a student. It was a man. He was not old, but he looked worn and desperate. His clothes were dirty. His eyes darted around the room, wide and unfocused. In his right hand, held low and tight against his leg, was a knife. It was a common kitchen knife, but the edge caught the fluorescent light. Mina froze. The glass beaker in her hand hovered over the sink. The observer noted the immediate, massive physiological shift. Her heart rate exploded. Her breath caught. Fear, pure and primal, flooded her system. The scan painted a picture of a classic non-combatant facing a lethal threat. Freeze response. But the freeze lasted less than 2 seconds. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted from the man's face to the knife, to the door behind him, then swept across her classroom. It was not a look of panic. It was a look of rapid, frantic assessment. The man took a stumbling step into the room. Don't scream," he stammered, his voice shaky. He wasn't a professional criminal. He was something more unpredictable. A person at the end of his rope. Mina did not scream. She took a slow, deliberate step backward, putting one of the heavy lab tables between herself and the man. Her movement was smooth, not a jerky retreat. It was a repositioning. "It's okay," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, though the observer's audio filters detected the high-frequency tremor beneath it. "You're okay. This is a safe place." She was talking to him like she would talk to a frightened animal or a distressed student. Her hands were down at her sides, open and non-threatening. But they were not still. Her right hand, hidden by the edge of the table, crept slowly toward the locked cabinet. Her fingers felt for the key, still in her lab coat pocket. The man took another step, his knuckles white on the knife handle. I need money. For the bus. I just need to get out of this city. I can help you with that," Mina said, her tone soothing, conversational. She was buying time. Her left hand, also hidden, felt along the table's surface. Her fingers closed around a cold metal object. The striker, the simple tool for creating sparks. She palmed it, her grip firm. With a soft click that was deafening in the quiet room, she unlocked the cabinet door with her right hand. She did not open it wide. She opened it just a crack, enough for her hand to slip inside. The observer's sensors, focused on her, detected the shape her fingers closed around. The sealed canister of ethyl alcohol. It was not a weapon. It was a lab supply. The man was getting agitated by her calm. "Just give me your wallet. Now," he hissed. Taking a faster step forward, Mina's mind was no longer on the man's pain. It was on chemistry. The observer's deep neural scan, approved after the June incident, revealed it. Her brain was not processing emotions. It was running calculations. The room was 20 by 30 feet. Ventilation, 2 high windows, closed. Airflow minimal. The alcohol was a volatile liquid. A fine mist, dispersed into the air near an open flame or a spark, would create a flash fire. A momentary inferno of heat and light, but little sustained flame in the open air. It would not burn long, but it would burn intensely and shockingly in the space between them. She was not planning to set the man on fire. She was planning to create a wall of fire. A barrier. A terrifying, disorienting distraction. And the striker in her other hand was the activation energy. Her thumb found the ridged wheel of the striker. Her index finger found the lever on the alcohol canister's spray nozzle. Her body was turned slightly, a stable stance. Her terrified eyes had hardened into a frighteningly focused resolve. She was a biology teacher. She understood the body's vulnerabilities to extreme heat and shock. She was preparing to turn her classroom into a demonstration she had never intended to give. The man raised the knife, about to lunge, desperation overriding his fear. Suddenly, a loud voice boomed from the hallway. "Everyone down! Police!" The school security guard, alerted by the janitor who had seen the man enter, stood in the doorway, a taser in his hand. The moment shattered. The man with the knife whimpered and dropped the weapon, putting his hands up. The tension rushed out of the room like air from a popped balloon. Mina's hands unfroze. She slowly, carefully, placed the unsprayed alcohol canister back inside the cabinet and closed the door. She set the striker down on the table. Then her legs gave way, and she slid to the floor, her back against the cabinet, trembling violently as the delayed shock hit her. She began to cry, silent tears of relief and released terror. In orbit. The silence was heavy. Clarn and his aide had watched the entire sequence, including the neural scan overlay. "She was terrified," the aide said, confused. "Yes," Clarn replied, his voice thin. "But look at the scan. See? The fear was present, but it was compartmentalized. Here, in this sector, the emotional response. But here, in the cognitive processing zones, it's a devastatingly clear decision tree analysis. She was calculating distance, fuel dispersal patterns, ignition probability, oxygen availability." He replayed the moment her hand closed on the alcohol. She was not looking for a blunt object to hit him with. She did not think to throw a beaker. Her first instinct under direct, lethal threat was to weaponize her knowledge of energy release. The aide processed it. The classroom was not a shelter. It was an arsenal. The tools of knowledge became tools of applied violence, Clarn finished. He looked at the final image. The sobbing teacher on the floor, surrounded by the peaceful tools of learning. The striker lay next to a microscope slide. Their environment is not just a habitat. It is a repository of potential weapons. And their minds are catalogs of lethality, disguised as something else. The builder sees force vectors and leverage. The gardener sees anatomy and weak points. The teacher sees chemistry and reaction chains. He turned away from the screen, a profound unease settling in his core. General Park's words echoed, no longer a boast, but a dark, simple truth. All of them could kill. It was not about strength. It was about cognition, a switch buried deep that could turn anything, a ruler, a story, a lesson plan into a key for violence. And every single human carried it. The mood on the Concorde assessment vessel was not one of completion, but of quiet crisis. The main viewing screen was dark. Assessor Clarn sat motionless, his 6 limbs folded tightly beneath him. The data from the 3 observations played on a loop in his mind. The aide waited nearby, its tentacles twitching with nervous energy. General Park Ji-ho was shown into the room. He looked the same as he had at their first meeting. Calm, composed, wearing his simple dark suit. He gave the same small, polite nod. He carried no data slates, no reports. He carried only himself. "Assessor Clarn," Ji-ho said, "you requested a final briefing." Clarn shifted, his carapace making a dry sound. "Your random sampling is concluded," he stated, his translator struggling to keep the emotion from his voice. "The data is contradictory to standard models." Ji-ho took a seat. He did not ask for tea this time. He simply waited. "Your subject B, Lee Jun," Clarn began, calling up the video of the garage. It played silently. The stillness, the strike, the spray, the wire. He used construction tools with tactical precision. His neural state showed calculation, not rage. He was a weapon waiting for a context. Ji-ho watched the playback, his face showing neither pride nor surprise. It showed recognition. "Subject C, Choi Soo-ji," Clarn continued. The screen showed the old woman telling her story. then facing the dog. She transmitted specific lethal knowledge as a bedtime story. She applied principles of interspecies dominance and anatomical targeting. She is a keeper of violent survival data. A flicker of something, was it sadness? Passed over Jiho's face, but he remained silent. And subject to Kim Mina. The screen showed the teacher, her hand on the alcohol canister, the neural scan glowing beside her image with cold, logical light. Faced with a blade, her first cognitive instinct was to formulate a chemical incendiary attack using her teaching tools. She saw her classroom not as a refuge, but as a field of components for violence. Klarn turned off the screen. The room was plunged into dim light. "You look for soldiers," he said, the accusation clear. "You present these latent capabilities as if they are the same. They are not. A soldier is a defined tool. This is a flaw, a disease of potential violence." Jiho took a slow breath. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it filled the quiet room. "You are correct, Assessor. We are not looking for soldiers. You are." He leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. "You see a flaw. We see a history. Our story is not written in the triumphs of our armies, but in the blood of ice ages, of saber-toothed cats, of famine, and of each other. That memory is not in our history books alone. It is in our bones. It is in the stories a grandmother tells. It is in the way a father's body moves when he hears a strange sound in his house. It is in the way a teacher's mind races through facts, any facts, to find a solution to an existential threat." He looked at the dark screen as if he could still see the three humans there. "You separate your warriors from your civilians. It is clean. For us, that line is a myth. Civilian does not mean incapable of violence. It means violence is not their profession. But make no mistake, the capacity is there. It is a switch. It sleeps under layers of civility, of love, of community. But it is wired directly into the brainstem. It is the will to preserve." Klarn felt his certainty crumbling. "But the trigger? It is chaotic, unpredictable. Is it?"
Jiho asked.
For June, the trigger was a threat to his children. For Suji, a threat to her granddaughter. For Mina, a direct threat to her own life. The trigger is not random. It is the threat of loss. The loss of family. The loss of self. The loss of the future. He paused. "What does your species fight for, Assessor?" "For the concord. For order. For the collective good," Klarn answered automatically. "A grand idea," Jiho said with a small, weary smile. "We fight for grand ideas too. But first we fight for the small ones. For the child in the bed. For the student in the desk. For the tree in the garden. We fight for the things right in front of us. And that makes the fight personal. Total. It makes a measuring tape a weapon and a garden spray a tool of war." The horror of it finally settled fully on Klarn. He saw it now. The Concord's doctrine was a beautifully built dam. Humanity was not a river they could channel. They were the groundwater, seeping everywhere, quiet and unseen, until the pressure broke everything apart. "So you are telling me," Klarn said, his voice barely a whisper, "that to integrate humanity is not to add a regiment of soldiers. It is to introduce a virus of potential, context-driven violence into our orderly understanding of the universe."
Jiho nodded slowly.
"You asked which of us are combat-ready. The teacher with her chemicals, the grandmother with her shears, the father with his ruler. They gave you your answer. The question you asked is wrong. The question isn't who can fight." He stood up, his movement breaking the tense stillness of the room. "The question is, what will they fight for?" Jiho said, looking down at the assessor. "And the answer to that, Assessor Klarn, is everything. The small, precious, fragile things. And that makes every single one of us, from the smallest child to the oldest elder, a guardian of a terrifying will. A will that can, in a heartbeat, turn whatever is at hand into a means of absolute defense." Jiho walked to the door. He stopped and looked back. "Your audit is complete. You have your data. We are not what you were looking for, but we are what we are." He left, The door hissed shut behind him. Clarn sat for a long time in the dark. The aide finally stirred. "What is the recommendation, Assessor? The classification is impossible. Do we list them as non-combatants? The data refutes it. Do we list them as combatants? It defies the definition." Clarn thought of the calm father building a bookshelf, the gentle grandmother singing to a child, the soft-spoken teacher watering her plants. He saw their other faces, the ones that lived just beneath the skin, the focused, empty eyes, the mask of command, the cold, calculating stare. "We do not classify them," Clarn said, the words tasting like ash. "We do not dare. To put them in a category is to believe we understand the boundaries. We do not." He turned to the command console. He began to type the final report for the Concord High Command. It was not a form. It was a warning. Re. Human species, Homo sapiens, integration assessment. Finding. Standard classification protocols are inapplicable and dangerously misleading. Conclusion. Do not categorize. Do not attempt to separate warrior from civilian. The dichotomy is false. Human combat readiness is not a function of training, but of cognitive framework activated by perceived threat to tribe or self. This capability is universal across the population and can utilize any environmental element. They are not a military asset. They are a conditional, planetary-scale phenomenon. Recommendation. Extreme caution. Integration requires a fundamental redefinition of civilian and combatant for all future interactions. He stared at the last line. It was not enough. He deleted it. He typed the only truth the data had shown him. Recommendation. Understand that for humanity, peace is not a default state. It is a conscious, daily choice, and every single one of them is capable of choosing otherwise. Assessor Clarn's report traveled across the vast, silent network of the Galactic Concord. It moved from his ship to a regional hub, then through subspace relays to the heart of the governing body. It landed in the data stream of the High Council, a gathering of beings from a dozen species who had, over millennia, standardized the universe. The council convened. The report was not just data. It was a disruption. Attached were the video logs, the garage, the garden, the classroom. They watched the calm, peaceful humans. Then they watched them change. They saw the tools in their hands become something else. They heard the stories. They saw the calculations behind the eyes. There was a long silence after the playback ended. Point one. Counselor, a being of flowing energy and light, pulsed with confusion. The data is clear, but the conclusion is illogical. A species cannot be universally latent. There must be a spectrum. A second, whose form was a sturdy, crystalline structure, resonated a reply. The spectrum is not of capacity. It is of trigger. The report states it. The trigger is perceived threat to tribe or self. The definition of tribe and self for this species appears dangerously flexible. It can extend to a single child, a plot of land, an idea. The debate lasted for days. Some argued for denial. To accept this was to upend the Concord's most basic social and military doctrines. Others argued for extreme caution, suggesting humanity be placed under a form of permanent quarantine, observed but never integrated. But Clarn's report was thorough. He had included General Jiho's final words. The question is, what will they fight for? And the answer to that is everything. This was the key the Concord had missed. Other species fought for territory, for resources, for ideological dominance. Humanity would fight for those things too. But first and most fiercely, they would fight for the specific, the personal, the loved. A threat to a single human child could, in theory, trigger a response from an entire planet because every adult on that planet had once been a child or loved one. The chain of empathy was a potential chain of mobilization. It was the crystalline counselor who finally proposed the solution. We cannot classify them within our old boxes. To do so is to invite disaster. We must create a new box, with a warning written on it in the brightest colors. And so, the Concord made its decision. On Earth, the news arrived through diplomatic channels. General Park Jiho read the document in his office. It granted humanity associate status in the Galactic Concord, with all the trade and scientific benefits that entailed. But there were appendices, pages of legal and diplomatic clarifications. Near the end, he found it. The classification. For every other species, the Concord database had entries like combat ready percentage, 12.3% or civilian military dichotomy. Standard. For Homo sapiens, it read species designation, human, Terran, conditional lethality index, universal. Note: lethality is context-dependent, linked to perceived threats against individual, familial, or tribal integrity. Capacity for weaponization of environment is inherent and extends across entire population. Treat all individuals with appropriate awareness of this conditional state. Jiho allowed himself a small, tired smile. It was not a victory. It was a recognition, a warning label for his entire species. He put the document down and looked out the window at the people walking in the street below. In Busan, Kim Mina was on a field trip with her biology class at a seaside park. The incident in the classroom had left her shaken, but life had moved on. She was pointing out different types of seaweed to a group of students, her voice gentle and excited. The scar of fear was still there, deep inside. But so was her love for the world, for its fragile, beautiful systems. She held a piece of kelp, explaining its structure. Her hands were once again tools for teaching, not for survival. For now, Ryan Taejun. Lee Jun was finishing the small bookshelf. He sanded the last edge, his movements careful and loving. He would paint it tomorrow, a soft blue, his daughter's favorite color. In the corner of the garage, the titanium ruler hung back on its peg. The spray can was on a shelf. The wire was coiled neatly. They were just tools again. But he knew, and the tools knew, what else they could be. He carried that knowledge quietly, a weight he wished he never had to feel again. He carried it for his children. Diane Jeonju. Choi Suji sat under her persimmon tree. Her granddaughter was making a daisy chain nearby. Suji watched her, her old heart full of a quiet, fierce love. The story of the boar was just a story to the girl now. One day, if the world was unkind, she might remember its lesson. Suji hoped she never had to. She hoped the only cutting her granddaughter ever did was to prune a flower for a chain. She touched the rough bark of the tree, a tree her own father had taught her how to care for and how to defend. Above them all, the stars twinkled. Among them now moved ships of the Concord. Their commanders and diplomats had new briefings to read, new protocols to follow. They looked at the blue-green world with a new kind of respect, tinged with a very old kind of fear. The humans below had no official warriors in the Concord sense. They had teachers, architects, and grandmothers. They had people who built shelves, told stories, and explained how things grew. And in the vast, silent databases of the galaxy, next to the name of their world was a simple, terrible fact. They were all, every last one of them, conditional weapons. Peace was their choice every single day, and the universe now knew to let them make it. The story was over. The lesson was learned. The humans went on living, their deadly potential sleeping lightly, tucked away behind smiles and routines and love, waiting for a reason to wake up. The galaxy hoped it never gave them one.